Tonight, lawmakers vow to pass gun control. What has a chance of making it through the House and Senate? And the American economy, how trade with China is impacting bank accounts here in the United States. Plus, a preview of next week's election in Israel. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
President Trump's national security advisor is out. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm Eric Phillips. President Trump made the announcement on Twitter today.
Yeah, the news coming as a big surprise to many. Amber Strong has the details from the White House. Amber?
Yeah, that's right, Eric and Jenna. There's been tension between the two for quite some time. Even still, this firing was a bit abrupt. Here's how the president explained it via Twitter. I informed John Bolton last night that his services are no longer needed at the White House. I disagreed strongly with many of his suggestions, as did others in the administration. And therefore, I asked John for his resignation, which was given to me this morning. As we've seen with past administrations, and certainly with this one, there's always two sides to every story. Here is John Bolton's take on what happened. I offered to resign last night, and President Trump said, let's talk about it tomorrow. Now, in that tweet, the president said he disagreed with John Bolton on many things. Two of those things we know. One is Iran, and the second is those recent dealings with the Taliban. Eric and Jenna, back to you guys.
All right, Amber, thank you very much. And we're joined now by our chief political analyst. I got to tell you that, looking at today happening was really something, because just an hour before the tweets from the president came out, we got word that he was going to be involved in a press conference today. So, was this a surprise to everyone there? What can you explain about this?
It was a surprise to everybody other than President Trump and John Bolton. That's pretty much the deal. You're right. There was a press conference scheduled for 1:30 with John Bolton there, and then what? Did anybody tell the press shop that, by the way, he doesn't work here anymore? Anyhow, the question was posed to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at a press conference that he was actually at, not with John Bolton. That question was asked whether or not he was taken by surprise, and here's Mike Pompeo's comical answer.
Were you two blindsided by what occurred today? That he's no longer with the administration? Was it news to you today? Because last night we were told he would be here today.
Yeah, I'm never surprised.
Well, let me ask you this.
And I don't mean that on just this issue. And I think Secretary Mnuchin would say the same thing. We work very closely with the President of the United States. I think we have a pretty good understanding of how he's thinking about things. I think you'd agree, Stephen, at nearly all times. And so, our mission says not to talk about these inner workings and the palace intrigue that I know you are so curious about, but rather to talk about the things that matter to American foreign policy.
I think Secretary Pompeo sums it up when he says, I'm never surprised, and at this point, I think he represents the views of every single American watching Donald Trump's administration. It's like Survivor Trump edition. Who's out tonight?
TV.
Yeah, reality TV.
David, so you were there today at this news conference. It looked like Pompeo was a little more, shall we say, upbeat than he normally is. He and Bolton clashed a lot.
Yeah, you will call it upbeat. That's a good word. I'll call it a bit smug. Bolton and Pompeo didn't necessarily see eye to eye. And let's be clear, Bolton and Pompeo, if Pompeo was a congressman, and he used to be a congressman, him and Bolton pretty much see eye to eye. But as Secretary of State, it's different. He's serving the President of the United States. He has to deal with all of the diplomacy here. And the truth of the matter is that, and this is what I really could never understand, why did John Bolton take the job to begin with? He's a hawk. He is an interventionist. Some called him a warmonger. Even Donald Trump called him a potential warmonger. Donald Trump is an isolationist, doesn't want to get involved in all that. So it really seemed like a mismatch from the very beginning.
So we can switch gears just a little bit. Something else that came out of today's press conference. Pompeo says that President Trump would meet with Iran's leader without any preconditions. Now, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And honestly, from a conservative perspective, let's be honest, if you're a conservative and this was Barack Obama, hey, you've got a real problem with this. But it's President Trump, and he's got Teflon associated with him at all times. And so what, he can do no wrong? It's a bit hypocritical. But the truth of the matter is that if you're meeting with Rouhani, the Iranian or Iran's leader, Look, that opens up a huge can of worms here, and there's going to be a lot of potential repercussions. Because remember, he's potentially doing this with no preconditions at the UN General Assembly coming up later in September.
David, this is another administration official to leave. What does this say about just the revolving door at the White House?
Well, he's not a politician, Donald Trump, right? We know this, and so therefore he's not going to do things the traditional way, and this is what we get. We get helter-skelter. I call him the human Etch-a-Sketch. I've said it here before, and I'll say it again. That's what he is, and when you're a human Etch-a-Sketch, you get an Etch-a-Sketch administration, and that's what we've got.
I love your analogies, David. Thank you very much.
I'm going to trademark that, Eric.
I know, right? Thank you.
I will.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Well, up on Capitol Hill, the debate over gun violence is reaching a fever pitch, and there's some new interesting polling out from the Washington Post and ABC News. It shows 6 in 10 Americans fear a mass shooting, and more than half feel stricter gun laws would reduce mass shootings. CBN News Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us from the Hill with more. Abigail?
Well, now that Congress is back in session, gun control is on top of the agenda for House Democrats, who are blaming the president and Republicans for not taking action.
In the wake of dual shootings in Dayton and El Paso, Democrats want action.
There's a historic opportunity for President Trump to lead his party, finally, toward passing sensible gun safety laws.
89% of Americans in a Washington Post ABC News poll support background checks for all gun purchases, including private and gun show sales.
We respect the Second Amendment, and we recognize that most folks in and around guns and ammunition are honorable, law-abiding citizens.
New Jersey's Democrat governor unveiled measures Tuesday to pressure banks and retailers to force gun makers to conduct background checks. After a Monday meeting at the White House, a bipartisan group of mayors made their goal clear.
Our goal is singular, and it's to get passage on background checks.
This president has sat down trying to find what is the best way to make sure these are never duplicated again.
Republicans point out the president's support of a ban on bump stocks in the wake of the 2017 Las Vegas shooting that killed nearly 60 people. And after a Texas church bloodbath that same year, the signing of a Republican-backed bill to fix the federal background check database. The shooter in Dayton carried a 100-round double-drum magazine. Democrats in the House want a ban on such high-capacity magazines.
If we can save even one life, then by God, we've got to do it.
The FBI was warned twice about the shooter in the Parkland High School rampage. But after sending mixed signals on expanded background checks for gun buyers, the president is clear on one thing.
It's the people that pull the trigger. It's not the gun that pulls the trigger.
Now, reporters questioned Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on if there is any gun control legislation he's planning on bringing to the Senate floor, and he repeatedly answered that he will only bring something to the floor if he hears from the White House that there is something that the president supports and will definitely sign.
Yeah, Abigail, House Whip Steve Scalise, he's a well-known victim of gun violence himself. I know you've gotten the chance to speak to him about where he stands on this issue.
Yes, we spoke to him this afternoon, and he said, first and foremost, when these incidents happen, we need to remember to be praying for the victims and their families. And he criticized his Democrat colleagues, who he says are now jumping in front of the camera the day of these shootings and calling for gun control legislation, which he says in some cases wouldn't even prevent some of these mass shootings. And he argues that there already are hundreds of gun control laws in place, but the problem is they're not being enforced. Take a look.
Time and time again, we see it's not the fact that there wasn't a background check system. It's that some of these people cleared a background check and they shouldn't have been able to because they had a criminal past that wasn't fed into the background check system. So we've passed legislation to address those problems. Why not also go and close loops on these people that say they're going to be mass shooters? Even in the Parkland case, he told people the FBI had a file on him and the FBI chose not to act. Who's been held accountable for those kind of big mishaps?
He also argues that the real issue we should be looking at here is that mental health issue.
All right, Abigail Robertson on Capitol Hill, thank you.
Well, voting is almost finished in North Carolina in an election to fill a vacant congressional seat. It's a tight race viewed by some as a referendum on President Trump's job performance. The president knows North Carolina is an important state to win if he's to be reelected. So last night he held a rally touting his economic success and defending trade with China.
And China wants to talk. They want to talk. China's lost 3 million jobs. Thousands of companies are leaving China. The supply chain is crumbling because they can't pay the tariffs. And our country has taken over things that you would have never thought. As an example, hundreds of billions of dollars have been and are coming into our country in the form of tariffs, and China's eating the cost.
Stephen Moore is a former Trump economic advisor and an economist with the Heritage Foundation, and he joins us now.
Hi, guys.
Stephen, good to have you. Thank you
Welcome.
for being here. So we heard from President Trump last night. He was talking about China and the U.S. tariffs. He says it's a good thing. At the same time, farmers here in the United States are feeling the pinch. Stephen, what do you make of the whole situation?
Well, first of all, I think most Americans agree that Trump is fighting the good fight here, that China has become increasingly a menace on the global scene, both economically through their predatory trade practices and also building up their military in a very aggressive and dangerous way. So, China is no longer a friend. They are, an adversary. And I think we're almost in a new Cold War era with China. This trade war, and I don't know if we should call it a trade war or a trade dispute, but it has gone on now for 2 years. And I think Trump is getting frustrated because the Chinese are not negotiating in good faith. One day they say they'll do one thing and the next day they do the next. And so you're right, this is hurting farmers. So the way I put it, I think Trump has said this too, there's some short-term pain here to the economy, no question, from this trade war. But if he can get this done and we can get something where they agree to buy more of our products, more of our agriculture, more of our manufacturing items, it'll be good for both countries.
Well, according to a new ABC News Washington Post poll, 60% of Americans believe that we're heading into recession because of all these woes, these trade wars. 60%.
I have not seen that poll.
Yeah.
I don't believe that for a minute.
You don't believe it?
No, we're not headed to recession. Now, I would never say never. But the economy's really strong right now. Come on. We just got this jobs report out last week. It's showing a record number of Americans working. Never more have we had 158 million Americans working. We do today. We have the lowest unemployment rate and the lowest unemployment for blacks, for Hispanics, for women, for people without a college degree than any time in 50 years. Wages are rising. So, no, it's a strong economy. Is it weakened because of the trade war? Yes, it has.
Stephen, shifting gears here, Congress is now back in session. They have 3 weeks to pass a budget before we see another government shutdown.
We've been through this before many times, haven't we?
Back to the future, right?
Exactly. Why are we here again?
It's just the new way of doing business in Washington, and it's a shame, isn't it? It's like it's like a teenage boy who won't do his homework until the day, an hour before it's due, and it's become almost comical, but it has negative effects because you remember there have been years we've been running up against the debt clock where we have had to shut down the government. That's not any way to run a government, and so it's irresponsible behavior. And frankly, I'm going to blame both parties for this. The spending that's going on is highly irresponsible. I talked to Pat Robertson about this. And he agreed with me. It's both parties that are responsible for this, and they can't seem to. We're going to probably run a deficit that's close to $1 trillion this year. That's a lot of debt.
Yeah, that is a lot. Considering this Back to the Future type thing, what happens if we see another shutdown?
Well, there's not going to be a shutdown. They pretty much know what they want to do. There's some, outstanding issues. The problem is that the compromise that they reached gave all the big spenders everything they wanted. So the military and the Pentagon people got all their money they wanted. The Democrats wanted more money for social programs. We put that in. So the taxpayers, in my opinion, remember that grand deal that they set a few months ago. Everybody in Washington was happy in the swamp. But people outside of Washington are looking in. I can't tell you how many times I hear from people, I'm sure I'll hear from people after this show saying, why won't they do something about tightening their belt and cutting spending and balancing the budget? We're so far away from that today.
All right, Stephen Moore with the Heritage Foundation. We have to leave it there, but thank you. It's always great to have you.
Thank you very much. Up next, Congress is back and the fight continues. A look at the push to pass a Born Alive Protections Act.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Congressional Republicans are again leading the charge to help save the lives of babies that are born after an abortion attempt.
As Paul Strand reports from Capitol Hill, most Americans believe in the message of the Born Alive Protection Act, but some Democrats are keeping the legislation from moving forward.
Withholding medical care for a baby that survived a botched abortion, 77% of Americans oppose that. 70% of Democrats oppose that. And yet the Democrats that head up the House have refused 80 times to let a Baby Born Alive Protection Act come to a vote.
Congress members held this hearing to highlight the need to protect these abortion survivors. A number of witnesses decried this modern-day infanticide and the House leadership's unwillingness to stop it.
Babies are born alive after some abortions. And if we can't protect even the babies that are born alive, then we know that the so-called right to choose for abortion has gone completely out of control. Now it's talking about outside the womb, not just inside the womb.
House Minority Whip Steve Scalise.
There are babies that survive abortions. In many different cases, we've had witnesses talk about it. And so to have medical professionals testifying that it's happening, that there are states, including New York, who ushered in a law that allow the baby to be killed after it's born alive because you don't have a federal protection.
All babies, whether they are wanted, whether they are premature, whether they have a congenital anomaly, are still people. And all of them need to be treated with the same standard of care.
Former abortionist Kathy Altman, now a pro-lifer, explained the mindset of those who let these abortion survivors die.
Because the object of the abortion was to have a dead baby, not really to end the pregnancy. They can be sued. That baby can sue them later because of defects from the procedure. They may not do well because they're premature and they're going to have problems. The parents could sue. They have every reason to get rid of the baby rather than allow that baby to live.
Former nurse Jill Stanek found out firsthand abortion workers were taking babies from botched abortions off to die at her hospital.
One night, a nursing coworker was taking a little abortion survivor to the soiled utility room, and when she told me what she was doing, I couldn't bear the thought of this suffering child dying alone, and so I cradled and rocked him for the 45 minutes that he lived.
In one 11-year period, the CDC reported 143 babies surviving abortion attempts, and the number's far likely higher because so few of these incidents get reported. Now, if a Born Alive Protection Act should pass, An abortionist who deliberately kills one of these babies could face charges of murder. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
Voters prepare to head to the polls in Israel. A look at what to expect as Benjamin Netanyahu once again fights to stay in power. That's coming up next.
Give me that. Bye. Sure, life is busy, but I found a way to make a huge difference in people's lives. I guess you could say I'm changing the world right here from home. I bring medical supplies and doctors to people in need, and dig wells so that villagers can have clean and safe water to drink. I make it possible to preach the gospel in over 100 countries, including right here in America. And when disaster strikes, I'm there, providing food, thank you, and emergency supplies to give people hope again. Every day, CBN and I are making the world a better place. Here you go. My life is hectic, so I joined CBN through Pledge Express. My bank does all the work, and I know that my gift is being used where it's needed most. So become a CBN partner and join Pledge Express, because you can do a world of good right from where you are. Hi, good morning. Are you ready to get started?
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is vowing to begin annexing West Bank settlements if he wins re-election next week.
Yeah, the vote will mark the first time ever Israelis will go back to the polls for national elections twice in 1 year. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has that story.
Israeli voters are expressing different priorities as they plan for the September national elections.
Security matters more than anything else. Things, issues like Iran, like Hamas.
The most important issue for me is to stay a Jewish state, a strong state.
According to political scientist Dr. Emmanuel Navon, however, there's only one real issue.
Netanyahu. That is the topic of the election. Basically, that is what Blue and White is all about, being against Netanyahu. Likud is about supporting Netanyahu. And that's also why we are having an early election.
Israelis will have more than 30 political parties or lists to choose from on September 17th. The parties will be competing for 120 Knesset seats. The party winning the most seats will likely be asked to form the next government. And that's where it gets complicated. According to opinion polls, Netanyahu's Likud party is running even with the liberal Blue and White party led by Benny Gantz. That means all eyes are on Avigdor Lieberman of the Israel Beitenu party as the potential kingmaker.
Neither Likud nor Blue and White have a coalition. In other words, it's very clear from most polls that Netanyahu will not have a right-wing coalition without Lieberman, and Benny Gantz will not have a central-left coalition without Lieberman either.
Lieberman wants a unity government made up of elements from both Likud and Blue and White.
In other words, we're not going to go to elections again. Forget about this. There's no such scenario.
Over the summer, Netanyahu became Israel's longest-serving prime minister. Supporters credit him for the strong economy, improving relations with neighboring Arab states, and helping make ties with the U.S. stronger than ever. His detractors point to his legal problems, an upcoming indictment on corruption charges. Israelis are divided.
Our government is very corrupted. I myself very hate Benjamin Netanyahu.
If all your life you went to a dentist or a car person that fixed your car and he's doing a good job for years, why will you replace him, right? The same baby is doing a good job for years.
So, come the elections, the world will see whether or not Israelis still believe Netanyahu is the only viable choice as leader for Israel. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Still ahead on Faith Nation, an amazing story of survival after a boat capsizes off the coast of Georgia. Stick around for that.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
As the nations rage, you can stand with Israel.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
Call 1-800-700-7000 and get to life.
This is our nature as a country.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he has, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
Support Israel in their time of need. Get to Life, now available on DVD. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
And I wish that other people throughout the world could see this side of Israel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
It's being called a miracle. 4 men were feared lost when their boat caught on fire and capsized near Georgia.
Yeah, but after 30 hours and nonstop efforts from the U.S. Coast Guard, word came all men were still alive inside the now overturned boat.
This is historic. I have never seen anything like it. Absolutely, it was a miracle. Amazed to be in there 32 hours with nothing to eat, nothing to drink, 140 degrees, covered in oil and, water, could not see anything. Those 4 men are truly blessed to be alive.
And the Coast Guard jumped into immediate action and came up with the safest plan to remove all 4 men from inside the boat. First, making small holes to let fresh air in to reach the men, then passing them food, and eventually widening the holes big enough for all of the men to safely get out.
Proof positive that miracles do still happen.
Yeah, indeed. Goodness.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a great night.